Ancient Romans used to clean their teeth with urine. Specifically, they imported Portuguese urine because they believed it was the strongest. The ammonia in urine actually does have whitening properties, and this practice continued in some form until the 18th century. 10. There is a planet called HD 189733b, where it rains glass. Sideways. Wind speeds reach over 5,000 miles per hour, and the temperature is about 1,000 degrees Celsius. The silicate particles in the atmosphere scatter blue light, so the planet appears a beautiful deep blue from space. But getting close to it would shred you to pieces. 11. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than to the construction of the Great Pyramid. The pyramids were already ancient history by the time she was born. She lived around 30 BC. The pyramids were built around 2500 BC, and the moon landing was in 1969. Do the math. It is mind-bending. 12. The deepest point on Earth, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, goes down nearly 11 kilometers. If you placed Mount Everest at the bottom, its peak would still be over a mile underwater. We have better maps of Mars than we do of our own ocean floor. 13. Octopuses have 3 hearts, blue blood, and 9 brains. 1 central brain and a smaller one at the base of each arm. Each arm can taste and feel independently, and even make decisions without consulting the main brain. If you cut off an octopus arm, it can continue to grab food and try to move it toward where the mouth used to be. 14. The Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest repositories of knowledge in the ancient world, was not destroyed in one dramatic fire. It declined slowly over centuries due to budget cuts, political neglect, and multiple small incidents. The romantic story of one catastrophic burning is mostly a myth. 15. There is a cloud of alcohol floating in space near the constellation Aquila. It is called Sagittarius B2, and it contains enough ethyl alcohol to fill 400 trillion pints of beer. Unfortunately, it is about 26,000 light-years away, so do not plan a road trip. 16. The T-Rex lived closer in time to us than it did to the Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurus went extinct about 80 million years before the T-Rex even existed. Dinosaurs were around for so long that they had their own ancient history. 17. The human body contains about 60,000 miles of blood vessels. That is enough to wrap around the Earth more than twice. Every single day, your heart pumps about 2,000 gallons of blood through this network, and you never even think about it. 18. In 1971, the Soviet Union accidentally created the door to hell, a massive burning crater in Turkmenistan. Geologists were drilling for natural gas when the ground collapsed, creating a huge hole. They set it on fire thinking it would burn out in a few weeks. It has been burning continuously for over 50 years. 19. The Antikythera mechanism, found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, is over 2,000 years old. It is essentially an ancient analog computer designed to predict astronomical positions, eclipses, and even the timing of the Olympic Games. Nothing this complex was built again for another 1,500 years. Venus rotates so slowly that a single day on Venus is longer than its entire year. It takes about 243 Earth days to complete one rotation, but only about 225 Earth days to orbit the Sun. Also, it rotates backwards compared to most other planets. 21. The oldest known living organism is a bristlecone pine tree in California named Methuselah. It is over 4,800 years old. This tree was already ancient when the Egyptian pyramids were being built. Its exact location is kept secret to protect it from vandalism. 22. During the construction of the Hoover Dam, so much concrete was used that if it were poured into a single column 1 foot square, it would reach higher than the altitude of a commercial airplane. The concrete is still curing to this day. Engineers estimate it will take another 500 years to fully harden. 23. There is a fungus in Oregon called Armillaria ostoyae, also known as the honey mushroom. It covers about 2,400 acres and is estimated to be over 2,400 years old. By area, it is the largest living organism on Earth, and most of it is underground, so you would never know you were walking on top of it. 24. In space, if two pieces of the same type of metal touch each other, they will permanently bond together. This is called cold welding. On Earth, the thin layer of oxidation on metal surfaces prevents this. But in the vacuum of space, there is no oxidation barrier, so the atoms simply join. 25. The shortest war in history was between Britain and Zanzibar on August 27, 1896. It lasted between 38 and 45 minutes. The Sultan of Zanzibar refused to step down, so the British opened fire. The Sultan's palace was destroyed, and the war was over before most people finished their morning tea. 26. Tardigrades, also known as water bears, are microscopic creatures that can survive almost anything. They can withstand temperatures close to absolute zero, extreme radiation, the vacuum of space, and pressures 6 times greater than the deepest ocean trench. They have been found alive after being frozen for 30 years. 27. The ancient city of Derinkuyu in Turkey is an underground city carved out of volcanic rock. It extends about 85 meters deep and could shelter approximately 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. It has ventilation shafts, wells, churches, stables, and wine cellars, all underground. 28. If you could fold a piece of paper 42 times, it would reach the moon. This sounds impossible, but each fold doubles the thickness. After 42 folds, the paper would be thick enough to bridge the roughly 240,000 miles between Earth and the moon. Of course, no one has ever folded a piece of paper more than 12 times. 29. Pluto was discovered in 1930 and was demoted from planet status in 2006. In that time, it had not even completed one full orbit around the Sun. A single Pluto year is about 248 Earth years, so Pluto will not finish its first discovered orbit until around 2178. 30. The ancient Egyptians used a form of toothpaste made from crushed rock salt, dried iris flowers, pepper, and mint. Some historians believe it was more effective than many toothpaste brands sold in the 20th century. They also invented the first known breath mints. 31. There are more stars in the observable universe than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. Current estimates put the number of stars at around 200 sextillion. That is a 2 followed by 23 zeros. And each of those stars could potentially have its own planetary system. 32. Lake Baikal in Siberia contains about 20% of the world's unfrozen surface fresh water. It is the deepest and oldest lake on the planet, roughly 25 million years old. If every river on Earth flowed into Lake Baikal, it would take about a year to fill it up. 33. The tallest mountain in the solar system is Olympus Mons on Mars. It rises about 72,000 feet, nearly 3 times the height of Mount Everest. Its base is so wide that if you stood at the edge, the mountain would extend beyond the horizon, and you would not even realize you were on a mountain. 34. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible. The combination of low moisture, high acidity, and natural hydrogen peroxide makes it one of the only foods that lasts forever. 35. The Sahara Desert was once lush and green. About 10,000 years ago, it was covered in vegetation, lakes, and rivers. Ancient rock art found in the region shows people swimming, fishing, and herding cattle. The transformation from green to desert happened over just a few hundred years due to a shift in Earth's axial tilt. 36. A photon of light that leaves the surface of the Sun takes only about 8 minutes to reach Earth. But that same photon may have taken between 10,000 and 170,000 years to travel from the core of the Sun to its surface, bouncing around between atoms the entire time. 37. The Great Wall of China is not visible from space with the naked eye. This is one of the most persistent myths in popular culture. Astronauts have confirmed that it is too narrow to be seen from orbit. However, you can see highways, airports, and even the Great Pyramids. 38. Crows can recognize individual human faces and hold grudges for years. Researchers at the University of Washington wore masks while capturing crows. Years later, crows in the area would still mob and dive bomb anyone wearing that specific mask. Even crows that were not born when the original capture happened. They teach their grudges to their children. 39. The entire internet weighs about as much as a single strawberry. All the electrons that carry data across the global network have a combined weight of roughly 50 grams. That is the weight of the information age, about 1 strawberry. 40. In 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted with such force that it caused the Year Without a Summer in 1816. Temperatures dropped globally, crops failed across Europe and North America, and widespread famine followed. It was the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded history. 41. There is a place in Venezuela called Catatumbo, where lightning strikes almost every night for about 10 hours straight. It happens roughly 260 nights per year and has been going on for centuries. The phenomenon is caused by winds blowing across Lake Maracaibo and colliding with warm, moist air from the Andes. 42. Sharks have been around longer than trees. The first sharks appeared about 450 million years ago, while the first trees did not appear until roughly 350 million years ago. Sharks survived 5 mass extinctions, including the one that killed the dinosaurs. 43. The human brain consumes about 20% of the body's total energy, despite being only about 2% of its weight. Even when you are sleeping, your brain is burning through calories to maintain essential functions. Thinking hard does not burn significantly more calories, though. That is a myth. 44. The deepest hole ever drilled by humans is the Kola Super Deep Borehole in Russia. It goes down about 12 kilometers, roughly 7.5 miles. At that depth, temperatures reach 180 degrees Celsius. Scientists had to stop because the rock became more like a plastic substance that kept closing the hole. 45. An asteroid the size of a car enters Earth's atmosphere about once a year. It burns up before reaching the surface, creating a spectacular fire. An asteroid large enough to cause regional damage hits roughly once every 1,000 years, and one large enough to cause a mass extinction event hits about once every 100 million years. 46. The ancient Greeks invented the first vending machine. It was designed by Hero of Alexandria around the 1st century AD and dispensed holy water in exchange for a coin. The coin would fall onto a lever, which opened a valve and released a specific amount of water. 47. There are more possible iterations of a chess game than atoms in the observable universe. The number of possible chess games is estimated at 10 to the power of 120. The number of atoms in the observable universe is only about 10 to the power of 80. Chess is literally more complex than the universe itself in terms of possible arrangements. 48. The pistol shrimp can snap its claw so fast that it creates a bubble that reaches temperatures close to the surface of the sun, about 4,700 degrees Celsius. The resulting shock wave stuns or kills prey. For a fraction of a second, this tiny shrimp generates one of the hottest temperatures on Earth. 49. Woolly mammoths were still alive when the Great Pyramid was being built. The last population survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean until about 2000 BC. The pyramids were being constructed around 2500 BC. So for a brief period, both coexisted on this planet. 50. If you removed all the empty space from the atoms that make up every human on Earth, the entire human race would fit into a sugar cube. Atoms are overwhelmingly empty space. The actual matter in them, protons, neutrons, and electrons, is vanishingly tiny compared to the space between them. 51. The Bermuda Triangle actually has no more disappearances than any other comparable area of ocean. Insurance companies do not charge higher rates for ships passing. The entire mystery was largely created by sensationalized reporting in the 1960s and 70s. 52. A day on Mercury lasts about 59 Earth days, but because of its strange orbital mechanics, a sunrise-to-sunrise cycle on Mercury takes about 176 Earth days. So if you lived there, you would experience less than 2 sunrises per Mercury year. 53. The longest hiccuping spree in recorded history lasted 68 years. Charles Osborne from Iowa started hiccuping in 1922 and did not stop until 1990. He hiccuped approximately 430 million times. Doctors never found a cure. The hiccups just stopped on their own. 54. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, there are hydrothermal vents that support entire ecosystems without any sunlight. These creatures survive on chemosynthesis instead of photosynthesis, using chemicals from the vents as their energy source. Some scientists believe this could be how life first started on Earth, and possibly on other worlds too. 55. The code name for the D-Day invasion of Normandy, Overlord, was almost compromised because a school teacher's crossword puzzle in the Daily Telegraph contained 5 of the operation's top-secret code words in the weeks before the invasion. MI5 investigated, but concluded it was just an incredible coincidence. 56. If the sun were the size of a typical front door, Earth would be about the size of a nickel. Jupiter would be about the size of a basketball. And the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, would be another front door, sitting about 4,000 miles away. 57. The giant sequoia trees in California are so massive that they create their own weather. Moisture evaporating from their enormous canopies generates fog and light precipitation. A single mature sequoia can contain enough wood to build 45-room houses. 58. Some species of bamboo can grow up to 91 centimeters, about 3 feet, in a single day. You can literally watch it grow in real time. Despite this incredible growth rate, bamboo only flowers once every 60 to 130 years. When it does flower, all bamboo of the same species around the world flowers simultaneously, regardless of location. 59. The coldest temperature ever recorded in the universe outside of a laboratory was -272 degrees Celsius, found in the Boomerang Nebula. That is just 1 degree above absolute zero. By comparison, outer space is typically about -270 degrees Celsius. 60. Ancient Mayan astronomers calculated the length of a year to be 365.2420 days. The modern accepted value is 365.2422. They were accurate to within 30 seconds per year, without telescopes, computers, or any modern instruments. 61. Your body replaces about 330 billion cells every single day. That is roughly 1% of all the cells in your body. Over the course of 7 to 10 years, virtually every cell in your body has been replaced. You are literally not the same person you were a decade ago, at least on a cellular level. 62. The International Space Station travels at about 17,500 miles per hour. At that speed, astronauts aboard the ISS witness 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every single day. They orbit Earth once every 90 minutes. 63. There is a species of immortal flatworm called a planarian that can be cut into over 200 pieces, and each piece will regenerate into a complete new worm with all its memories intact. Scientists tested this by training worms to find food, chopping them up, and watching the new worms remember where the food was. 64. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in caves near the Dead Sea between 1947 and 1956, contain the oldest known copies of the Hebrew Bible. Some fragments date back to the 3rd century BC, A shepherd boy found the first scrolls by accident when he threw a rock into a cave and heard something break. 65. Jupiter's Great Red Spot is a storm that has been raging for at least 350 years, possibly much longer. It is so large that 2 to 3 Earths could fit inside it. However, recent observations show it has been shrinking. In the late 1800s, it was about 40,000 kilometers wide. Now it is roughly half that size. 66. The Nazca lines in Peru are enormous geoglyphs carved into the desert floor over 2,000 years ago. They depict animals, plants, and geometric shapes, some stretching over 300 meters long. They can only be fully seen from the air, which raises the question, who were they made for? 67. There are about 10 times more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. But before you panic, bacteria are much smaller than human cells, so they only account for about 1 to 3% of your total body mass. A 200-pound person carries roughly 2 to 6 pounds of bacteria. 68. The speed of light is approximately 186,000 miles per second. At that speed, you could travel around Earth 7.5 times in 1 second. Yet even at that incomprehensible speed, light from the nearest galaxy, Andromeda, takes 2.5 million years to reach us. 69. The ancient city of Pompeii was frozen in time by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The volcanic ash preserved everything: buildings, food, graffiti, and even the expressions on people's faces. Archaeologists have found ancient fast food restaurants, election posters, and very explicit wall paintings. 70. There is enough gold in Earth's core to coat the entire surface of the planet to a depth of about 1.5 feet. The gold sank to the core during the planet's formation because of its high. We only have access to the tiny fraction that arrived later via asteroid impacts. 71. A group of flamingos is called a flamboyance. A group of crows is called a murder. A group of porcupines is called a prickle. And a group of pugs is called a grumble. English is a strange and wonderful language. 72. The universe is expanding faster than the speed of light. Distant galaxies are moving away from us at velocities that exceed light speed, not because they are moving through space that fast, but because the space between us is stretching. This means there are regions of the universe we will never be able to observe, no matter how long we wait. 73. Dinosaur bones are not actually bones. Over millions of years, the original bone material is completely replaced by minerals like calcite and silica. What we call dinosaur bones are really rocks that perfectly replicate the original bone structure, atom by atom. The real bone material is long gone. 74. The Rosetta Stone was found by a French soldier in Egypt in 1799. It contained the same text written in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. This allowed scholars to finally decode Egyptian hieroglyphics, which had been a mystery for over 1,000 years. One random stone unlocked an entire civilization. 75. If you could drive a car straight up at 60 miles per hour, you would reach space in about an hour. The edge of space, known as the Kármán line, is only about 62 miles above sea level. Space is closer than most people think. It is just straight up. 76. The ancient Inca Empire had no written language, yet they managed one of the most complex administrative systems in the pre-modern world. They used a system of knotted strings called quipu to record data. Some scholars believe quipus could encode not just numbers, but also narratives and histories. We still cannot fully decode them. 77. Bananas are slightly radioactive because they contain potassium-40. You would need to eat about 10 million bananas in one sitting to die from radiation poisoning. Scientists actually use a unit called the banana equivalent dose to measure radiation exposure. 78. The longest cave system in the world is Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. It has over 400 miles of explored passageways, and new sections are still being discovered. The full extent of the cave system is unknown. Some estimates suggest it could eventually measure over 1,000 miles. 79. There is an underwater river in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula called Cenote Angelita. It appears as a river flowing along the bottom of a cenote, a submerged sinkhole. The river is actually a layer of hydrogen sulfide that separates fresh water above from salt water below, creating a misty, eerie boundary that looks exactly like an underwater riverbank. 80. The Roman Empire at its peak had a road network covering about 250,000 miles. Many of these roads were so well built that they are still in use today, 2,000 years later. Some modern European highways followed the exact same routes the Romans laid out. 81. Neutron stars spin so fast that some rotate hundreds of times per second. The fastest known neutron star spins at 716 times per second. At that speed, a point on its equator moves at about 1/4 the speed of light. One rotation takes less than 1.5 milliseconds. 82. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth. It stretches over 1,400 miles along the coast of Australia and can be seen from space. It is not a single organism. It is made up of billions of tiny creatures called coral polyps. Each one is smaller than a pencil eraser. 83. There is a planet called PSRJ 1719-1438b that is essentially a giant diamond. It is about 5 times the size of Earth and is believed to be made of crystallized. It orbits a pulsar, a rapidly spinning neutron star, and takes about 2 hours and 10 minutes to complete one orbit. 84. In ancient Rome, left-handed people were considered untrustworthy and evil. The Latin word for left is sinister, which is where the English word comes from. In many cultures throughout history, left-handedness has been associated with bad luck, witchcraft, and moral corruption. 85. The oldest water on Earth was found 2 miles deep in a Canadian mine. It has been trapped in rock for over 2 billion years, about half the age of the planet itself. Scientists analyzed it and found it contained dissolved gases that could support microbial life. The water smells terrible, reportedly similar to a mixture of sulfur and metal. 86. A bolt of lightning is about 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. The temperature of a lightning bolt can reach about 30,000 Kelvin, while the sun's surface is only about 5,800 Kelvin. Lightning is one of the most extreme phenomena that occurs naturally on our planet. 87. The Eiffel Tower grows about 6 inches taller in summer. Heat causes the iron to expand, and the tower visibly stretches. It also leans slightly away from the sun as the metal on the sunlit side expands more than the shaded side. 88. There are about 500,000 pieces of debris orbiting Earth right now, traveling at speeds up to 17,500 miles per hour. At that speed, even a fleck of paint can crack a space shuttle window. Space agencies track this debris constantly to avoid collisions with satellites and the ISS. 89. The first known use of 0 as a number, not just a placeholder, comes from ancient India around the 7th century. The mathematician Brahmagupta wrote rules for arithmetic involving 0 in 628 AD. Before that, many civilizations had no concept of nothingness as a mathematical value. 90. Some caves in Borneo contain rock art that is over 40,000 years old, older than the famous cave paintings in Lascaux, France. These paintings depict animals and hand stencils, and they push back the timeline of when humans began creating art. Our species has been making art almost as long as it has existed. 91. The total weight of all ants on Earth roughly equals the total weight of all humans. There are estimated to be about 20 quadrillion ants on the planet. Individually, they are tiny, but collectively, they are one of the most dominant forms of life on Earth. 92. There is a phenomenon called a moonbow, a rainbow produced by moonlight instead of sunlight. They are extremely rare because moonlight is usually too faint to produce visible colors. When they do appear, they look like pale white arcs to the naked eye, but long exposure photography reveals their full spectrum of colors. 93. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, may have never actually existed in Babylon. Some historians believe they were actually located in Nineveh, built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib, and were later misattributed to Babylon through centuries of confused historical accounts. 94. Sound cannot travel through space because there is no medium, no air molecules, for it to vibrate through. However, if you could somehow hear the sound of the sun, it would be about 125 decibels by the time it reached Earth. That is roughly as loud as a rock concert, playing non-stop forever. 95. Greenland sharks can live for over 400 years, making them the longest-lived vertebrates known to science. They do not reach sexual maturity until they are about 150 years old. A Greenland shark alive today could have been swimming when Shakespeare was writing his plays. 96. Lake Nyos in Cameroon killed over 1,700 people in a single night in 1986, without any eruption or explosion. The lake sits on a volcanic crater and had been accumulating carbon dioxide at its bottom. One night, the gas suddenly released in a massive cloud that suffocated everything within a 15-mile radius. 97. The fingerprints of a koala are virtually indistinguishable from human fingerprints, even under a microscope. This has actually caused confusion at crime scenes in Australia. Despite being separated by millions of years of evolution, koalas and humans independently evolved nearly identical fingerprint patterns. 98. If you squeezed out all the viruses in the ocean and laid them end to end, they would stretch for about 200 million light years. The oceans contain roughly 10 to the power of 31 individual viruses. That is more viruses in the sea than stars in the observable universe. 99. The ancient Egyptians had pregnancy tests. They would have a woman urinate on barley and wheat seeds. If the barley grew, it was a boy. If the wheat grew, it was a girl. If nothing grew, she was not pregnant. Modern studies have shown this test was actually about 70% accurate at detecting pregnancy. 100. The core of Jupiter is so hot and under so much pressure that hydrogen exists in a metallic liquid state. This metallic hydrogen generates the most powerful magnetic field of any planet in the solar system, about 20,000 times stronger than Earth's. Jupiter's magnetosphere is so large that if it were visible to the naked eye, it would appear bigger than the moon in our sky. 101. In the 1950s, the United States seriously considered nuking the moon as a show of military dominance during the Cold War. The project was called a Study of Lunar Research Flights, or Project A119. A young Carl Sagan was involved in the research. The plan was eventually scrapped because officials feared public backlash. 102. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the... Scientists estimate there are roughly 3 trillion trees on our planet, compared to about 200 to 400 billion stars in our galaxy. However, we are losing about 10 billion trees per year to deforestation. 103. The loudest sound in recorded history was the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883. It was heard nearly 3,000 miles away in Rodriguez Island. The pressure wave circled the globe 3.5 times, and barometers around the world recorded the atmospheric disturbance for 5 days straight. 104. Platypuses are one of the few mammals that produce venom. Males have a spur on their hind legs that delivers enough venom to kill a dog and cause excruciating pain in humans for months. The pain is resistant to morphine. These animals also detect prey using electroreception, sensing the electric fields generated by muscle contractions. 105. There is a place in India called Cherrapunji that holds the record for the most rainfall in a single year. Over 26,000 millimeters, or about 86 feet of rain. That is enough to submerge a 9-story building. Paradoxically, the region also experiences water shortages during the dry season. 106. The Andromeda Galaxy is heading toward the Milky Way at about 250,000 miles per hour. In about 4.5 billion years, the two galaxies will collide and merge. But do not worry. The distances between stars are so vast that almost no stars will actually hit each other. The night sky will just look much more spectacular. 107. Ancient surgeons in India were performing nose reconstructions, an early form of plastic surgery, as far back as 600 BC. The technique was described by the physician Sushruta, who used skin from the forehead to create a new nose. This method is still used in modern reconstructive surgery and is called the Indian flap. 108. A single bolt of lightning contains enough energy to toast about 100,000 slices of bread. However, the energy is released so quickly, in just a few thousandths of a second, that capturing and storing it remains practically impossible with current technology. 109. The Sargasso Sea is the only sea in the world with no coastline. It is located in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean and is defined entirely by ocean currents: the Gulf Stream, the North Atlantic Current, the Canary Current, and the North Atlantic Equatorial Current. It is also the birthplace of all European and American eels. 110. In Japan, there is an island called Okunoshima that is completely overrun by wild rabbits.